Welcome, everyone, to an Edelman Circle of Trust podcast. I'm Oliver Hayes, the head of counter disinformation for EMEA for Edelman, and I'm joined today by our friend and partner.
Pleasure to be here. My name is Dmytro. I'm a Chief Business Development Officer and co-founder at Oswald.
Fantastic to have you here, Dmytro. Thank you. And we're going to be talking today about a fascinating report that you and your colleagues at Oswald have done, looking at kind of hostile narratives circulating about major corporations on TikTok and Telegram. But before we kind of dive into talking about the report and the analysis, it'd be great to hear from you a little bit about Oswald, your journey, where the company came from, and what the problems it's here to solve.
Yeah, thank you very much. And you know, it's an absolute pleasure to be here, and we're happy that we have this chance to show a bit of details together with Edelman's team on how these threats are propagating and what is actually happening in the various corners of information environment. So a bit about myself. I spent the vast majority of my career in what right now we call AI. Back then it was called machine learning. Back then it was called data science. And I'm building tech companies, startups, almost like as long as I can remember. I'm originally Ukrainian, so obviously when Russia invaded Ukraine, it touched myself, my family very personally. And in 2022, I felt that the world is changing. It's becoming, unfortunately, less comfortable and safe place. I think this is what we feel right now everywhere in the world, right?
Yeah.
But back then there was like a lot of unclarity. And when the war started, I wanted to obviously help. And I started asking people in the government, in the civil society, in the defense circles, guys, what kind of technologies can help you? What kind of challenges you face and how we can contribute? And basically that's how we landed on a problem of information threats. Because Russians as a hostile actor, state actor, but also right now we see more and more non-state actors employ information threats in order to damage the brands, erode trust between people, companies, and even, you know, each of us together. So that's why we jumped on this problem, what is called hybrid threats, and we're solving it for the last like 3 years.
Dmytro, you raise a really important point there, which is trust, and obviously something that is really important to us at Edelman as the house of trust. And I know our recent trust barometer that came out, you know, describes really the retreat into insularity of this whole thing of our society becoming fractured, and the kind of the part that dis, malinformation, narrative attacks can have in all that. So it feels like you're looking at an incredibly important topic right now, not just for businesses, but probably for wider society too.
Yeah, because I think, you know, all of us feel the same, that we are becoming, unfortunately, more isolated as a society. And it happens like on a personal level, on a brand and customer level, on a government level. And obviously this is a big challenge for our generation. We all need to handle. So this is a good problem to solve, like, frankly.
It is. It definitely is. So let's turn to that then. Let's turn to this fascinating analysis and research that you've conducted. Perhaps you can sort of set the scene by explaining the nature of the analysis and research that you did.
Sure. So basically, we scoped this investigation, this research on analysis of emerging media, specifically Telegram and TikTok. There is so many talks about like Facebook, like Instagram, Twitter. People know, you know, the dynamics already in there. We know all the threats, and these companies are typically trying, you know, to contribute to this, solving this issue. However, we see, and we can talk about this a bit later, but we see that the online space is becoming more and more fragmented. So 10 years ago, we just was like 2-3 social media, and that's fine. Everybody's there. Right now, we are more isolated. People tend to stick to the smaller communities, and these smaller communities can exist in various places. You're not limited anymore to like one Facebook platform. That's why Telegram, as a messaging platform with a social component for creating and running these communities, it's so crucial. On the other hand, TikTok, as obviously growing and as one of the most the fastest growing platforms in the world, is also presenting another approach to distributing the content. You don't subscribe to somebody, you don't choose who you will follow. You just served what you may probably like. That's another approach, and this is also kind of, I think, a bit underserved. So that's why we focused on these 2 platforms. we looked on the last half a year of the data to keep it fresh and relevant, and we think that 6 months can actually demonstrate some trends.
And actually, things change so fast now that, as you say, like if you look at data for the last 4 years, it's probably going to be misleading.
It will be totally different, like completely. And if we do this research in another half a year, we're going to have another dynamics as well.
Yeah.
So, but even in that dynamic environment, we need to try to kind of crystallize some trends. And we looked into the top 100-ish biggest brands and biggest companies in the world, because they anyway drive the majority of the kind of economic impact revenue. And we thought, and I think that's true, threats as well. So that's the scope of the research that we conducted.
Fantastic. And when you looked at these results, you looked at 2 hard-to-monitor channels, TikTok, Telegram, and then you looked at what the main adversarial narratives were targeting these 100 very significant, very large brands. And when you looked at the results, what surprised you most?
Yeah, I'm doing this for quite a while, and I think during our joint project, I finally realized the key problem and the key issue in the industry. And it's kind of similar to the, like a fairy tale about the boy and the wolf. So basically, the vast majority of the threats that we saw in the data, they're very short-lived. So they exist for 2-3 days, then they fade.
They flare and drop.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is fact number 1. The fact number 2 is that the vast majority of the threats are minor. So they're small. However, the third fact changes the picture, because there are some super threats, super spreaders, and you never know before these 2-3 days once they live, what will be this defining threat that can change the trajectory for your company maybe for the next 5 years.
What's going to really catch fire versus just sort of die down.
And you never know. We try to see if there's any way to predict it, and there is no. There is no way. You never know what will stick, because it's so dynamic. It depends on what is happening in the news, what is happening in the economy, and so on. So that's why, imagine that you are the manager in the company dealing with this.
Yeah.
You need to constantly monitor thousands of different instances of issues and incidents. The vast majority of them, 90%, are not impactful. That's why your manager can tell you, just drop it. But then when the big issue happens, suddenly the whole company is under the fire. So, and that's the essence and the problem of the industry that we saw, that surprised me, that you need to be kind of ensuring your success. You don't need to just try to fight this fire. You need to have a fire alarm. You need to have the insurance in order to make sure that things like that will not happen.
And I guess it comes down to thresholds again, doesn't it? As you say, if you overreact to every little bit of online criticism that's out there, obviously you're going to be in a state of permanent panic. On the other hand, if you don't respond, as you say, early and swiftly to a real narrative threat, then suddenly you're behind the curve, you're trying to play catch up, and things become as we see, things become very, very difficult for large corporations.
I mean, you have 3 days. In 3 days, it's done. I mean, the vast majority of the threats, more than 90%, are fade in a week. So in a big corporation, week, it's not a long time frame, right? And in a week, you're already lost.
Large, complex organizations, lots of stakeholders trying to take decisions on what the organization should do.
That's why you need to solve the problem not in the moment when they appeared, but way before that, to have the certain contingency plans, continuous monitoring, to change the mindset around it. If you don't change it, you will suffer and you will lose. You just don't know when and where and why, but it will definitely happen.
And when you looked at these 100 large companies, which kind of sectors did you see were most affected by some of these narratives, and possibly what kind of narratives?
So the threats are spread between the few key sectors. So the first and the main one, it's a technology and cloud infrastructure. So, and that's highlights the importance of that in our lives, right? If you think about this, the semiconductors, the digital sovereignty, cloud, AI. So this is all the things and all the companies and organizations and brands that are targeted. This is number one. Second one, it's defense manufacturing, arms producing, and big government contractors. Because they're dealing with government and public money. They're obviously exposed
geopolitical tensions. You know, a lot
Exactly
of people
that.
who have, you know, strong views on that sector and what it's doing in different regions. Yeah.
And also state actors that would like to kind of disrupt the operations of this defense manufacturers. Finance, you know, bank run because of the false information or even true information that is opinionated. This is probably a nightmare of any manager in the financial industry. And healthcare. So this is the key industries that are impacted. And then there is others like FMCG, like fashion, and so on. But they are slightly
lower down the list. And again, it's interesting, isn't it, there that the sort of the sectors you've identified, defense, finance, pharma, you know, these are all, you know, hugely important sectors, normally with, you know, exposed to complex geopolitical risks, often with quite sort of socially polarizing issues behind them in some ways. People have strong views, strong opinions. And so I guess that creates a sort of fertile ground for these kind of narratives and criticisms to emerge.
Indeed. And I think that fertile ground is changing also over time. From where we started, it's very dynamic. I think that the split in a 6 months or in a year would be different because people would be caring about different kind of issues again. So I think that these industries like tech, defense, healthcare, finance will be definitely in the top, but there could be changes in the leadership and there could be new players coming in.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes complete sense. And I was also really struck in what you were saying there about, and having seen your data, some of the narratives, the kind of range of different things in there. I think as you've said before, this is not about narratives that can be easily and purely classed as disinformation. In other words, false information that is being deliberately spread by a hostile actor and that you might be able to fact check. It's more complicated than that, isn't it?
Yeah, it is much more complicated. So when we got all of this data about the brands, and it's a massive, massive data set. It's like tens of millions of data points. We onboarded our AI capabilities in order to structure this, identify threats, and then categorize them. And we have any category you can imagine, from cybersecurity issues to the physical threats, natural disaster, violation in a workplace, illegal, everything. So there was like more than 50 different categories. And then there were a few things that we realized. First, and I think this is fairly new thing maybe for the last 2 years, that hostile actors, they trying to focus not on the false information, not on the fake space that they create, but they try to weaponize the facts. And if you think about this is very logical. Why should I invent something if any company in the world has problems?
Yeah.
Like there's always once in a while, bad financial report. There's always drop somewhere in a quarter about some specific kind of issue. There's always some litigation, some cyber leak and stuff like that. This has happened. It is life. But even small issue that actually happened can be opinionated, can be portrayed as something,
can be exaggerated. It can be weaponized. Yeah.
And it's so much easier to make people believe in this rather than like creating the false information. So that's the first thing. The second is, you may have a question, what are these facts that is actually weaponized? And there are two categories. First of all, it's legal. So if you have a legal dispute, there is a quite high probability that your opponent, somebody who wants to harm you, geopolitical actor, may try to use it. Because this is in a court, right? Even if you are not guilty, I mean, this is there. Second, it's a physical issues. I mean, protests, sabotage, issues on the production lines, everything that is happening in the real world. So it's not about like your reputation and just saying that, your product is bad and here is a bad reviews. This is about a real impact on the ground, and this is about like disrupting your operations. So we see that often this narrative, they are kind of multi-domain. So they're not like targeting one. It could be a mix between like physical, legal, joining together. And they have a clear target, not first to erode trust, but also make an influence on a real thing on the ground. Like maybe if there is a protest, make it bigger.
That's what causes real damage to brands and to corporations. And as you say, I think it's sometimes people think about, okay, there are narratives out there on social media. It's caused this reputational damage, but that's kind of a bit separate, and we can compartmentalize that from the way we think about our broader risks in the enterprise. But actually, I think what your research shows is how this is very much an integrated thing, and we need to think about these narrative threats as being part of the overall enterprise risk.
And I have a very important message here for all of the PR professionals, CMOs, and so on. Guys, when somebody is attacking you, they don't have a metric of engagement, of use. They have a metric disrupting your business, doing financial or physical harm to your assets, your people, your management, and so on. They're not managing it likes, they're managing it real impact on the ground. That's why, like, adversary can create a group or ignite a group of 100 people who will exchange sounded messages. There will be no big, amount of likes or comments, but these 100 people will come and will destroy your property. And we see thousands of examples like that. And hundreds of them we prevented working with the clients. But that's the modern trend, like focusing not on the engagement or just media metrics when you do harm, but on actual trust between real world
impacts. And obviously that sounds as if we're being, talking about organizing groups of people to go and conduct damage to property. Sounds, there's a risk that sounds a bit alarmist to some people, but I think it is worth bearing in mind again that as the recent how sort of polarizing some of these debates can become for people. And as our trust barometer showed, again, what we're seeing is that more and more the information ecosystem is becoming very fragmented. It's becoming very polarized. We know that now only about 39% of people globally are seeing media at least once a week that presents an opposing worldview to them. So quite low. 70% of people are saying that they're not willing to trust someone who's different from them in terms of their values or behaviors or beliefs. So in that sort of environment, you can see these kind of self-reinforcing echo chambers, can't you? That kind of where people's beliefs and behaviors can become, quite escalated, unfortunately.
And from your perspective, what can be done? So we exist in this environment, right? Companies cannot change it, right? So, but what they should do, how they should behave in order to kind of navigate this silos. So what would you think?
So I think, you raised a really good point earlier on about preparation, how important that is, because again, I think for us, as we're advising clients, we're always talking about the importance of preparation. So as you say, when you're in an environment when that cycle of a hostile narrative can be very, very short and things can either go up and disappear or go viral very quickly, you don't want to be in a situation where you're trying to invent your procedures in the moment. So again, I think that, as you said, having that ability to kind of monitor and track trends really reliably, not just on sort of the more established social media channels, but on fringe ones as well, becomes very, very important. And then having the decision-making protocols and the playbooks in place, so you know how to respond in the moment.
I'll ask you a diplomatic question. How do you think, how would you grade general preparation for the industry from, A to D? What is your grade?
So I think there's, to try and give a diplomatic answer, I think naturally, as with anything, there's a range. You've got some organizations that are really kind of sector leading, investing heavily in these capabilities and thinking hard about it. There are some for whom, this is a relatively new threat, and understandably, busy senior leaders have a lot of different risks and threats on their plates, and they're trying to take difficult decisions about where they invest limited resources to mitigate those risks. I think what we're seeing is in the way that cybersecurity has become much more professional and well established over the last 20 years with, CISOs, senior responsibility to manage those risks. I think we're still moving through that cycle in terms of the need to secure our information environment, not just our information technology, but actually our information integrity.
So we're getting better every day.
We're getting better. We're getting better, but there's an arms race because equally the information environment, the information ecosystem is in some ways getting more and more challenging.
Oh, that's true. Even look at the modern technologies, like creating an avatar of fake customer that will spread was 10 years ago was something in a
science fiction,
sci-fi movies. Now everybody can make it. So we are living in a science fiction. We just need to, fully realize it.
I think that's right. Look, Dmytro, it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you. Do you have any kind of final recommendations or reflections that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
So I would tell that we should change the mindset, how we treat the information threat, the trust threats. Let's call it this way. First, we should treat it as insurance because it will definitely happen to each and every big company. Smaller issue, bigger issue, very big issue, but it will happen. The question is when, right?
Yeah.
And you need to be prepared for this. So if you prepare right, your spending actually, if you even think about the financial terms, will be definitely much lower. So you will save money.
Yeah.
This is the first. Second, there is a need of cross-functional teams because if somebody is targeting your leadership or targeting your assets, it's not only a question of like information and monitoring. So this could go to cybersecurity department, to physical security department, to law enforcement. So there is much more need for cooperation, and that's something organizational-wise that companies can do. And the third one, I mean, we need to give some positive outlook, right?
Yeah.
So I think that breaking a silence between people inside the company, inside the industry, it's very important. So I think that each organization should focus on not only making sure that the trust is not destroyed, but also on invest into building this.
Yeah.
But this is probably part of another podcast, right?
Yeah, it probably is, and we could talk for a long time. But I think building on your point there around insurance and to give one leaving thought of my own, I think going even beyond that, it's about how you protect your ability to seize opportunities. Because it's like if you decide, if you want to make a bold move, you're launching a new product, you're doing market entry into a new country. For a lot of good business reasons, you might want to do that. You want to make a bold move, but you need to think about how do I kind of protect that move?
You need to be prepared.
Yeah, you need to be prepared. It's just like if you're going on holiday and you're going to somewhere that's a bit more far-flung and more exotic, like you need to think a bit more and do a bit more preparation so that you can have a trouble-free, wonderful experience.
Just
and have
enjoy
an amazing
this.
time. Exactly. So I think that's it. It's, as you say, it's not all doom and gloom. There are things you can do to make things better. But thanks so much for sharing your research and the analysis. Really enjoyed the conversation today.
Yeah.
And best of luck with all of Osval's work in the future.
Yeah. Pleasure being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.